Is it accurate to assert that India under Modi's leadership is experiencing a recession of democracy, particularly in light of the decline in India's global democracy ranking?
Very close to me because I've been spent 5 years researching this very topic. I've seen virtually no objective evidence that there has been any decline in the quality of India's democracy over the last 10 years. There's lots of subjective feeling among intellectuals that there's been a decline in the quality of India's democracy, but that decline seems to only be occurring specifically in those areas that cannot be objectively verified. In every area that we're able to objectively verify, there does not seem to be any decline in the quality of Indian democracy. Now, that is not the same as saying that there are no problems of Indian democracy. There are serious challenges facing Indian democracy, but those challenges predated 2014, and those challenges continue today. If I were to criticize Mr. Modi and the BJP, my main criticism in terms of the quality of democracy would be that they have used the same tools that were used by the Congress government before them. That is, they've used the UAPA, they've used the Enforcement Directorate, they've selective prosecutions. That is, they've done all the same things that Congress did. Now, that's not to say that they're good. They're certainly wrong. They were wrong when Congress did them. They're wrong when the BJP does them. The question is, for me as a social scientist, has there been any increase in these problems of democracy? And in every area where I'm able to check the qualitative impression against quantitative data. So, I can check things like safety and security for journalists. I can check things like the levels of academic freedom and number of academics who've lost their jobs. I can check things like the competitiveness of elections. I can check things like the numbers of prosecutions of political opponents. So whenever we get to the numbers on any of these issues, there seems to be virtually no change. Now, that in itself is an indictment because we'd like to see improvement. Right? I think every government should have the goal, not just of being no worse than the politicians before. That's a pretty modest goal. We'd like to have politicians who want to see their countries reach ever higher levels of moral perfection. We started off by talking about the moral quality of democracy. The BJP talks a good talk about the moral quality of democracy. It would be fantastic if the party did more to live up to that rhetoric instead of simply replicating the kinds of tactics that have been used in India ever since the Congress era. Every time a BJP leader points and says, well, Congress did this too, well, that may be correct, but it's not morally uplifting. And if you read the BJP's rhetoric, the party clearly aspires to being a morally uplifting party. I don't think it's living up to that noble objective. But that said, it's not doing anything worse than previous governments have done, and by the international norms of democracy, it's not doing anything that other democracies don't do. That is, when I benchmark India's democracy against other high-quality democracies, it looks very similar. There are abuses and problems, but they're the same abuses and problems that we see in other countries. And that's something that's not reflected on the VDEM rankings, the Variety of Democracy Institute rankings, which have become the globally dominant rankings. But there are other rankings. So the globally dominant ranking until 2014 was a ranking project called the Polity 5 project. The Polity 5 project ranked countries, or rated countries, I should say, on a series of dimensions related to democracy. And the scale they use runs from -10 for complete dictatorship to +10 for the highest qualities of democracy. India is rated by the Polity project as a +9. The Australia here where I live gets a +10. The United States, my home country, gets a +8. So is Indian democracy somewhere roughly on the level of Australian or American democracy? I think the Polity project pretty much gets it correct. That is, that broad evaluation that India is a democracy of the same quality as a typical Western democracy. Yeah, I think that's correct. Is it a perfect democracy? No. But does anyone think America is a perfect democracy? Well, no one I've ever talked to thinks that America is a perfect democracy. But remember those words from the American Constitution. In order to create a more perfect union. That's the goal of our Constitution. And I would hope in India there's the same goal. The goal to make a more perfect India, not to make a perfect India, to make a more perfect India. And as long as Indians pursue that goal, Indians are doing just as well and falling short in the same ways as other democracies around the world.